But I think it's used in witchcraft.
Oh,
It's a plant. What's crazy is it's extremely toxic.
Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah, it'll kill you.
Magical, witchcraft, magical thing. But it was also like a sedative or narcotic or something like it. Like it's pretty.
basically
It's a
shrooms.
wild plant to be giving someone. I'll say that.
It was ancient shrooms. It was their version of shrooms. And
Well, it is because
There you go.
because what I read is it causes hallucinations and drowsiness, and then to Matt's point, poisoning.
You may not be mad that you had some mandrake. I don't know.
Hey, before we jump into the podcast, we want to thank all our donors and supporters who make the Today Count show possible. It's through your generosity that we're able to shape leaders through this content and this podcast. And be sure to like, subscribe, and follow wherever you find yourself coming across this content. All right, let's get to the podcast.
Everybody, welcome back to the Genesis Project on the Today Count show. Today, we have Pastor Matt Martin, Pastor Winston Harris. I'm going to shake things up a little bit today. Winston is going to read the first part of our chapter in Genesis chapter 30, and Pastor Matt's going to read the balance, particularly when we get into this weird stuff about sheep turning certain colors and all of that. But just to kind of lay a groundwork today, we're looking at something that happens even this day. Maybe not this exact story, but we're going to see rivalry, that comes between people who should be on the same side, but apparently are not. We're going to be looking at deceit. We're going to be looking at leadership principles, that deal with things when our identity is not clear. But this should be a very interesting chapter of Genesis 30. So I'll turn it over to Pastor Winston.
Yeah, we'll look at starting verse 1. When Rachel saw that she wasn't having any children for Jacob, she became jealous of her sister. She pleaded with Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." That's pretty dramatic right there, off the bat. Then Jacob became furious with Rachel. "Am I God?" he asked. "He's the one who has kept you from having children." Then Rachel told him, "Take my maid Bilhah and sleep with her. She will bear children for me, and through her I can have a family too." So Rachel gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, and he slept with her. Bilhah became pregnant and presented him with a son. Rachel named him Dan, for she said, "God has vindicated me. He has heard my request and given me a son." Then Bilhah became pregnant again and gave Jacob a second son. Rachel named him Naphtali, for she said, "I have struggled hard with my sister and I'm winning." That's a pretty crazy statement right there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Leah realized that she wasn't getting pregnant anymore, so she took her servant Zilpah, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Soon Zilpah presented him with a son. Leah named him Gad, for she said, "How fortunate I am." Then Zilpah gave Jacob a second son, and Leah named him Asher, for she said, "What joy is mine. Now the other women will celebrate with me." One day during the wheat harvest, Reuben found some mandrakes growing in a field and brought them to his mother Leah. Rachel begged Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But Leah angrily replied, "Wasn't it enough that you stole my husband? Now will you steal my son's mandrakes too?" This is a reality show energy here. I'm just getting stealing. One, I don't really know what a mandrake is. Two, husbands are being stolen. There's all kinds of stuff happening. Rachel answered, "I will let Jacob sleep with you tonight if you give me some of the mandrakes." You can't make this stuff up. This is crazy. So that evening, as Jacob was coming home from the fields, Leah went out to meet with him. "You must come and sleep with me tonight," she said. "I have paid for you with some mandrakes that my son found." So that night he slept with Leah. I'm just going to pause real quick to say, how does that make Jacob feel? Like your value is mandrakes? I don't know. That's just like you've been paid for by. Is the mandrakes is a fruit, right? Is that?
Well, I think it's technically a vegetable.
That's even better.
But I think it's used in witchcraft.
Oh,
It's a plant. What's crazy is it's extremely toxic.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. It'll kill you.
Magical, like, yeah, witchcraft, magical thing with around fertility, I think was even one of the,
Uh-huh.
Okay. I
kind
mean,
of the
that
whole,
makes sense.
and then, but it was also like a sedative or a narcotic or something like it. Like it's pretty,
Basically,
it's a
shrooms.
wild plant to be giving someone. I'll say
It
that.
was ancient shrooms. It was their version of shrooms. And
Well, it is because
There you go.
because what I read is it causes hallucinations and drowsiness, and then to Matt's point, poisoning.
Yeah. You may not be mad that you had some mandrake. I don't know.
Did they participate in the mandrakes? So this is an interesting verse. And God answered Leah's prayers. She became pregnant again and gave birth to a fifth son for Jacob. She named him Issachar, for she said, God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband as a wife. Then Leah became pregnant again and gave birth to a sixth son for Jacob. She named him Zebulun, for she said, God has given me a good reward. Now my husband will treat me with respect, for I've given him 6 sons. Later she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel's plight and answered her prayers by enabling her to have children. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. God has removed my disgrace, she said, and she named him Joseph, for she said, may the Lord add yet another son to my life.
And of course, Joseph is going to become a huge topic here in the coming chapters. So just like doing an overview of what you just read, Rachel envies Leah's ability to bear children. She says, as you started laughing, she says to Jacob, give me children or I'll die.
It's pretty
right?
dramatic. Pretty dramatic.
Both women begin using their servants to compete. In today's terms, they would be their pimp, right?
Prostituted them out.
Yeah, prostituted them out. So even intimacy becomes transactional. And that kind of brings the whole mandrake, to what end would they go, to have kids.
Bartering.
And then get this, I don't know if you guys caught this, but the children are named as emotional statements. Vindication, struggle, victory. So these ladies, am I being too harsh to say that they have an identity crisis? They have a worth issue. They have a validation issue.
Yeah, everything is wrong with it, from their motives to, why they're attempting to do what they're attempting to do, to how they're naming them, and God only knows the contention that was, between them with all of this. So, but yeah, the lineage that would come out of this is God still redeems.
Right. I mean, he does. Yeah, God is still going to get done what he wants to get done for our benefit, for our benefit, even though this is as bad or worse than any of the trashy reality shows on television.
Highly dysfunctional.
Yeah, today.
Yeah, it reminds me too of Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah.
And
Here we go
this
again.
kind of generational approach to just, I'm going to jack up God's plans with my own plans and what I think I deserve and on my timeline. And yeah, they just make a mess of it all, manipulating their servants.
From a leadership perspective, here's some thoughts that are on my outline. As leaders, where we can apply this is notice that they're comparing impact instead of stewarding, managing the hand that they've been dealt. And then they're needing visible wins, or a leader can need visible wins to feel valuable. And then using people as means to prove something. And so when identity is unstable, everything becomes a scoreboard. But before we turn the page, so to speak, and Pastor Matt continue the story, I think the hinge in this chapter is verse 22, where it says, and then God remembered Rachel. Did God forget about Rachel? Or is that a figure of speech?
The early in Genesis, God remembered Noah. He
He never lost Noah, and in this he never lost Rachel. But you know that. I think some of it is God remembers the Hebrew word here. So some of this on remembers is not that I forgot, but it is a callback to the faithfulness of what I promised you. And so it's got promised his lineage, his plan to be produced. And it's through this Jacob, and it's through Rachel. And so we see it as he forgot Rachel, and really it's more. He's coming back to his faithfulness.
Yeah, and what I see is that both you and Winston are looking like professors with your glasses on, looking very distinguished.
Yes,
I feel like I'm in a student posture.
you should be. I wore these glasses so I would sound smarter.
Those of you listening don't even know he's wearing glasses.
That's right. Yes, for those of you not watching on YouTube, now all three of us have glasses on. I just put mine on to refer back to my notes. Another thing I want to say there, though, about God, our great God, our compassionate, gracious God, is even though both of these women, because when we go back to the story even of Leah, there is a similar statement, is there not, that is made that God saw Leah, God blessed Leah, something like that.
God answered her prayers.
He answered her prayers. And so even though both women are competing and doing things in a human, fleshly, darker way, it did not turn God's head from them. He still, in other words, he was God is like a wise parent in this story, where the kid is misbehaving, but the parent sees below the surface of the misbehaving to what's really going on. And I don't know. I just think that's pretty amazing, because, in society, we would have all kinds of things to say about these two women, and God would not necessarily disagree with us, but in spite of it, he still ministers to these ladies. So anyway, verse 22 is kind of like the hinge. I don't know. Do we want to continue on and Pastor Matt pick up with verse 25?
Well, I was just going to say,
go ahead.
In relation to that, it's almost like there was a right desire, wrong response. Like their desire to have children wasn't wrong, but how they went about it was wrong. And God addressed the desire, to your point, in spite of their response. They made a mess of what they were supposed to do with that desire. They didn't wait on God, essentially. They projected that God forgot about them. They projected that, somehow there was a disgrace. Verse 23, God has removed my disgrace. Did God ever say they were disgraceful for not having children?
No, but you make a really good point, because we can be judging the ladies in some ways too harshly, in the sense that am I being a chauvinist, or worse, to say that just like a man's leaning to provide and to protect, isn't there at least a leaning in the female gender to have children? I'm not saying every woman, so not being able to do that would seem to be a normal. So though there is competition, in the midst of focusing on the competition and the wrong ways they're dealing with it, we could be overlooking the fact that this not having the same compassion as God, where their sense of purpose in life has been ripped away from them with their plight. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't going to go start a business back then, so
right.
Where else are they going to find purpose and validation?
Yeah, they didn't have those options.
Great leaders don't ignore their past. They learn from it. Every decision you've made, every mistake, every win, every failure, it's all shaping the leader you're becoming. In Story, the art of learning from your past, you'll discover how to turn experience into wisdom, setbacks into strategy, and pain into purpose. This isn't just a book about reflection, it's a playbook for growth. If you want to lead with clarity, humility, and confidence, your story matters. Learn from it. Grab your copy of Story, The Art of Learning from Your Past, where books are sold.
This is a very interesting part of the chapter for so many reasons, because we're talking about how these women are reacting. Then now we get to verse 25 and says, after Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said, Laban, send me on my way so I can go back to my homeland. Give me my wife and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you. So he's been here 14 years plus. Now then he says, time to go home. I need to go where God's called me to go. What God was ultimately doing through Abraham and passing this on, Laban said to him, if I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. So I have this divine revelation that I'm blessed because of Jacob. I love would you call that revelation or manipulation? Because he said, name your wages and I will pay them for that. Yeah. So is it divine revelation, manipulation, or negotiation? Jim, let's talk about this. If you have somebody in your organization, if you have someone you're trying to persuade, if you would, that key team member, that person that is crushing it on the south side or whatever part of your business that you have, and you're like, man, I'm better because of you. You know, it's something that leaders wrestle with. So maybe Laban, even though he had his bumps and bruises, maybe he's a little bit more of a leader than we give him credit for.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even compromise, really, because something happened to Jacob. He was the clear loser in this deal. He sticks with it. But I think what we're seeing is over time. So here's a back at you, Matt. Am I being over spiritual to say that is it Jacob's shrewdness that is pulling him out of the mud in this ordeal, or is it God's covenant?
Yeah, or both working together as well. So Laban says, name your wages, I will pay them. Jacob said to him, you know how I've worked for you, how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had, it's almost a jab right here. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed me wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household? And again, there's a leadership principle there. You know, when I can do this, I'm ready to fly. And so he said, what shall I give you? He asked. Jacob said, don't give me anything, Jacob replied, but if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on the wages you've paid me, any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark colored will be considered stolen.
I don't know what's happening.
So Matt, you being the rancher, he supposedly has taken the inferior part of the flock. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, there's been seed. What's funny is now it's different. So now they call them dappled or spotted, and these goats today actually bring a little more money, more out of
just because they're unique. But yeah, so these would have been. Honestly, it looks like something's wrong with them. So they would have looked as if they had the defect in having the spots on or speckled. You would have wanted to get rid of them in this setting, but the interesting part of the story picks up here in just a moment. But Jacob is making it easy to say, if you see anything different than this, you'll know that I stole it. We agreed, said Laban, let it be as you have said. That same day, he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark colored lambs. And he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. In verse 37, I don't know how science and biology fit into this, so this is just God right here. Jacob, however, took fresh cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Basically, just peeling the bark, just took some and he made them stripped. Then he placed the peeled branches in all the watering troughs so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. When the flocks were in heat and came to drink, they mated in front of the branches, and they bore young that were streaked or speckled or spotted. Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the streaked and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals so they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban, the strong ones to Jacob. In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. Here's something interesting to say about that as one who raises goats. When goats are in heat, they don't pay attention if it's spotted, speckled, striped, male, female, which end it is. They don't care. They're just going. So the very fact that there's a tree limb placed in front of him, and because of the ones that were in front of that limb, that they would come out this spotted or speckled color is really, really unique. You have very little control over the color they produce. So it's very minimal. I have one goat, a Billy, that when he mates with any of the nannies, I have brown ones, light brown, dark brown. I have black with a white face. I have solid black. I have a black with a white spot. I have a brown that has 4 black feet. I have one that has 3 white feet. I have one that's really red. I have one so the fact that they're coming out spotted is unbelievable. Like, that is God's hand on Jacob. Whatever the limb, the stripe, whatever, that really is God, whatever that is. But knowing what I know about that, that's what's so interesting, is it's not like a bloodline being preserved. It's not like, hey, we have this type of cow or this type of goat or this type of horse. We're talking about color, and just simply that there's no control over it. So that's very intriguing. And the other fact that Jacob had learned a lot about taking care of animals, because you can do this for a while. I can do it now. I can walk out and I can see the strong one first, and the weaklings in just a matter of seconds. I could separate them all easily. And so Jacob knew what he was doing. There was no accident. He knew what he was looking for. But the spotted and the stripped and the speckled, that's a whole thing there. I've never seen that in scripture until a couple of months ago while I was reading through this. I thought raising goats made me think of it, because you have no control over it.
Bizarre for sure.
Makes me never want to have goats.
Jacob really did get into selecting the weaker goats and the stronger goats. He got into a selective breeding process, which is one, how you become very successful in doing this. And the scripture is clear, is that he became, how does it say it in verse 43? In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous. And he was able to do that by stewarding the knowledge that he had about what he was working with, which again is, there's a principle there that we can live by, that he learned a craft and a trade that would seem silly to most. And he learned the details of, because you when you're breeding goats, you don't choose the color. That just don't happen. There could be, I use the same 2 billies for all of my breeding, and all of my goats come out multiple different colors: red, brown, black. I mean, I get all these different colors, and I'm not choosing that. I'm as surprised as anybody when it comes out. Where Jacob is over here, and God is blessing it because of this limb that has been peeled off or something, and he's keeping all these streaked and spotted. I think is what Scripture called dappled goats. And but looking at that, he's using he it tells us that he took the stronger and the weaker, and you can, if somebody who works with that long enough, you can quickly spot that. So he was seeing it quickly, and he'd separate them off. And he was sending the weaker ones back to Laban, which were probably solid colored. So it wasn't like he wasn't necessarily cheating the system. He was doing what he said he would do. And in the midst of all of that, God still blesses. God, because why? And, the question that I come up against is, why is God doing this? It's to fulfill his purpose. It's to fulfill God's purpose and to fulfill it through Jacob. Because we're going to see what happens with Joseph, and we're going to see what happens with, as the story goes. And I just love the detail that the Scripture gives us about this. I mean, it's just such a unique part of the story that adds so much color commentary to what we can do, or to what we can read and how we understand this. And just part of the Scripture, that the simple things that continue to amaze me.
Winston and I recorded a podcast earlier today where the topic of how insecurity in leadership, can really mess us up from the inside out. And again, theologically, I believe we're straight down the middle, focusing on that in spite of our human weaknesses, God continues to show himself faithful. In the process, isn't it fascinating, as you were pointing out, Matt, that here Jacob, while he was in prison, so to speak, figuratively, under the umbrella of Laban, he does learn a ton, and that's going to benefit him, the rest of his life. Sometimes we only see the negative of what is going on, and we don't see the positive. But back to insecurity, from a leadership perspective, when we let insecurity distort things, relationship become tools, blessings become competitions, and people lose sight of purpose. And we talked earlier that one of the things that we could possibly do to help us with purpose is that, I wonder if we gave Jacob an opportunity and said, hey, those years that you were under the yoke of Laban, that season that you were under the yoke of Laban, what would you name it? What would you call it? How did he deal with it psychologically? How did he deal with that? How did he, as you guys were saying, Matt and Winston, as you guys were saying earlier on in the chapter, or maybe as Matt was reading, this seems like manipulation versus manipulation. So maybe not a seed or root of bitterness, but definitely guardedness, definitely lack of trust, right? There's definitely that. And that's what you mentioned, Matt, in the world of business and leadership. When you don't have trust, things move slowly. And it's like, okay, I'll give you two. You give me two. You take little steps. You can't run. You can't run because you don't trust. So you take these careful little steps. And calculated. That's a good word. Calculated steps. But this whole chapter was about polygamy, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. Manipulation, jealousy, bargaining. But back to Matt's point, in all of these chapters, it doesn't stop God from continuing to do what he's going to do. The encouraging part for me is that I don't need to be perfect, but I can't justify my dysfunction either. How you live in between those two things.
Yeah, I mean, I think of, Romans 8:28, God works all things together for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. And so, sometimes we say that verse and it's like, what does that actually look like? I think you could argue Genesis shows us
Yeah.
what it looks like. There's
Yeah.
a lot of all things happening here.
Yeah.
And God is still using all of these things to achieve the
Yeah.
purposes that he wants through these broken people.
And as humans, can we rest in that? Can we trust that?
I think it's easier for us to trust it when it's our brokenness, but when we're on the other side of somebody else's brokenness, we're like, can God use that?
Because now we become a victim, and we are outraged, and we protest, and we've been mistreated. We've been persecuted.
Pastor Matt, you were sharing in a leadership teaching yesterday about what's the phrase you use with the working genius about the grace you give others, but not, or grace you give yourself.
Oh.
But not them?
Yeah. So with fundamental attribution error, where
Yeah.
where I allow myself more grace. If someone cuts me off in traffic, then, they're a bad driver, they're distracted, they're on their phone, they're a jerk, they're a, whatever. But if I cut someone off in traffic, then, well, I had a kid crying in the back seat, something fell into the floorboard. I just didn't see you. I got a phone call with bad news. I was just, I'm running late, all these excuses we give ourselves. But what we end up doing, we end up judging others based on, what we think about them.
Yeah, if I'm late to a meeting, it's because of bad traffic. It's because I'm really important and had to do lots of stuff.
Right.
You come late to a meeting, you're a slacker.
Yeah.
You're lazy.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't plan well. You didn't plan your time, and you didn't. That's exactly right.
Right.
So, and we all live in that, and that's the simplest form of that I've heard is we judge others by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intentions. And that's probably so true. As we look at them and we give them no grace, no benefit of the doubt. But when we slip up, we're like, well, what I meant to say or do, and so that's very true. The other piece that jumps out to me on this is, I'm gonna go back to how God blessed Jacob in this chapter. Is there's two places in here, or around 25 to verse 30 or so, where he's telling Laban, when I got here, you didn't have a whole lot, but because of the way I've cared for them, your flocks and your animals, you've now increased greatly. One of the beliefs, and I feel very confident in this statement, is because of these speckled or streaked goats, that there would be less of them because they would have been culled. They would have been pushed to the side because we want the solid color. So Jacob started with, even when he starts over again, he's starting with less than. He's starting with, he didn't take the best from Laban. He didn't take a great quantity. He started with less than, with things that would be considered less than in that culture, in that society. And yet in verse 43, we see that in this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to his own, and of what God was doing. So, God, if we'll allow it, God will take what seems like not enough in our leadership, in our conversations, in our ability to lead our companies, our teams, our people, and he will begin to prosper that in ways that we never dreamed possible.
These are high expectations, but 3 points that I'm looking at that kind of challenges us, maybe it would be a better way when you look at this story. And again, it's easy for us, isn't it, to hover above the story and look down upon it versus live in it. So with that said, the challenge is at least a few things. Stop measuring yourself against others. Another one is start measuring faithfulness to your assignment. It's funny how, for those of us who spend time thinking about our lives, thinking about purpose, we can write these beautiful purpose statements. and we can set these goals, and we understand the striving that's going to happen to accomplish these goals, and then we have the obstacles against those goals, but for the majority of that, we're choosing that. But when God allows or God drops something else on our lap, our response can be very different, and not seeing it as an assignment. Not, we will strive after something we want, but when we get something that we don't want, we don't see that as an assignment. We see that as a head-on collision or something. I don't know what we say, a curse, a punishment,
Burden.
a burden. At least that's me. I know what I want to do, and I know the obstacles I'm going to face. That's fine. But don't bring anything else. Don't T-bone me. I don't want to be T-boned. And if I get T-boned, I do not see that as an assignment. But I need to reconsider that. And then finally, this I think is a health idea. Striving is such a dangerous thing. Replace striving with disciplined trust. Who was it who wrote the book, Ruthless Trust? But that's one of the most dynamic books that I have read, that places absolute total trust in God, who he is, what he's doing, and what he's going to do. And if I were to actually grasp just a portion of that, how much different my life would be on a day-to-day basis. All right, we'll move on to chapter 31 next time. God bless you both. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for spending part of your day with us on the Today Count Show. If today's conversation encouraged you, challenged you, or helped you grow, share it with someone in your circle, because we're better when we grow together. And be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and stay connected with us on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And remember, real change doesn't happen someday. It happens today. Until next time, keep showing up, keep building, keep making today count.